south of the intersection of Harrison Road and State Highway 46 in Como County, Texas, and will serve the Harrison Tract subdivision, a new 1,403 lot subdivision in Como County, Texas. The treated effluent from the facility will be discharged to West Fork Dry Canal Creek, then the Guadalupe River Basin. We performed an administrative review of the application upon receipt to ensure that all required information is provided therein. We also performed a technical review of the application to ensure that the applicant adequately addressed all the required technical issues to ensure that wastewater from the facility will be treated to required effluent limits, standards for the protection of existing uses of the receiving water bodies. We established effluent limits and conditions to be included in the draft permit to maintain the receiving water bodies' designated uses and to protect human health and aquatic life. By accepting the draft permit, the owners and operators of the wastewater plant agree to follow and comply with the requirements of the draft permit. The draft permit was also sent to the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA received a copy of the application and draft permit on December 19, 2023. The EPA approved the draft permit on February 6, 2023. December 19, 2022. The first public notice pertaining to this application, the notice of receipt of application and intent to obtain a permit, or the NORI, was published in the Herald Zeitung on October 5th, 2022. Also, the applicant published the second public notice, Notice of Application and Preliminary Decision, or the NAPD, in the Herald Zeitung on January 31st, 2023. A copy of the application and draft permit is available for public viewing at Mammon Family Public Library at 131 Boulevarde Crossing Road in Boulevarde, Texas. I will now pass the microphone to Harrison Malley of the Environmental Law Division for information on the public participation aspects of the application process and the remaining steps in the permit process.
Good evening. My name is Cole Malley. I'm an attorney in the Environmental Law Division here at TCQ. My role is to explain where we are procedurally with the application. As Ben Cotta mentioned, staff has reviewed the application, prepared a draft permit, and they have made a preliminary determination that the permit, if issued, meets all statutory and regulatory requirements. The public comment period will end at the conclusion of this meeting. We'll respond to all comments made both orally and in writing. If you wish to request a contested case hearing on this application, you must provide comments in writing at the conclusion of tonight's meeting. Thank you.
All right, so I'll go ahead and move into the informal Q&A session now. First, I'm going to add some ground rules about the Q&A session. So if you could please come up to the microphone to speak so that everyone can hear you. I'd like to ask that only one person at a time comes and asks a question. If you have multiple questions, please ask the first question and allow for a complete response. Then you can ask your second question. After asking 2 or 3 questions, allow for the next person to come up to the microphone and ask their questions. You can get back in line and ask more questions if time allows it. This is a reminder that this is a live recording, so please step up to the microphone and speak into it to ask your question. So I'll go ahead and open the floor to anybody that has any questions.
Good evening. Thanks for coming to Smithson Valley High School. My name is Ed Harris. I've got 3 questions. How do you parse a sewage treatment plant dumping 6,000 gallons into the headwaters of the West Fork of the Dry Como Creek with another sewage treatment plant that's dumping hundreds of thousands of gallons into the Dry Como Creek on the main fork of the Dry Como Creek? First question. And how do you parse?
Let me answer the first question first.
I'll give you all 3 and then you can answer all 3. Second question is, how do you parse a sewage treatment plant that's going to empty into a possible quarry that has a water abatement plan? And I'm sure there's a water abatement plan attached to this sewage treatment plant. So how do you manage to say that sewage treatment plant's a great thing running through a quarry, which is gonna be another great thing, into a creek that runs into town where, I think there's a few people out there that have silver nutria shirts on, they swim in a Como River. So, I think a lot of people wanna hear, how do you approve something when you got two TCEQ permits running at the same time? And then the third question is there a MUD, a municipal utility district, connected to this 1,000 homes? Or is there a PUD, a public utility district, connected to this 1,000 homes, or this is a private development? That must have been in the permit somewhere. Those are my questions.
As for the MUD or PUD question, I'm unaware if there's a district attached to the specific application. So just to repeat my answer, I'm unaware of any district's applications tied to this discharge application. And I'll pass it to Sunny to talk about the cumulative impacts for any other regional facilities that might be in the segment.
Just to clarify the question, so you're talking about how we allow not only one but two plants to be discharging into the stream.
So both the West Fork and the Dry Como Creek empty into the Como River. They tie together down the Quarry Road. And so you have two bodies of water that are owned by the state coming together into the Como River. Are you taking these as mutually exclusive with each other? This one stands on its own and this one stands on its own? Or do you review both bodies of water? Because these are two sewage treatment plants that are the only ones out there. If you approve this, it's going to be the second one, the headwaters of the Como Creek.
So whenever we do a technical review for a wastewater treatment plant permit application, we have to make sure that it matches or exceeds the receiving water conditions. And so when we do look at the entire discharge route, even in this situation where you have two different routes merging into one final stream, you have to make sure that the waters are protective of their designated uses regardless. So when we do look at multiple plants and we see that we put in certain effluent limits, we ensure that they're protected of the state's waters, regardless of whether there's one or two plants. And if we have more plants, that's taken into consideration by the models we use.
The dissolved oxygen modeling review considers various factors when examining the impacts of proposed discharges by themselves, as well as in combination with other discharges. Due to the size of this discharge, relatively stringent effluent limits, and lack of other discharges downstream of discharge, EO modeling indicates that the discharge will return to ambient or background quality prior to any interaction with water bodies receiving treated wastewater discharges. Accordingly, no cumulative effects are expected from this discharge.
Yes, you can get live.
My name is Tony Silverar, and I live on the Conroe River in the heart of New Braunfels, Texas. And I have a question for anybody that's making the decision on what's going to happen, and also for Mr. Harrison back there. And my one question is would you allow your children or your grandchildren to swim in a pool even if it was only partially filled with gray water? By proposing what you're proposing to do, you will be flowing into the Como River, which will affect the entire economy of the town of New Braunfels. That what relies on this for their tourism, for their economics. And it's going to be a domino effect, because you've already apparently approved one thing, and now you're going to approve this. And there's a lot of ranches between here and New Braunfels. They're gonna be selling off as subdivisions and gonna be coming to you, so there'll be a domino effect. And just imagine your children swimming in gray water.
So this permit is protective of primary contact recreation, which means if you're swimming in this water and say you get a little bit of water in your mouth, you won't get sick or anything because it's protective of the water quality. And this discharge is 600,000 gallons per day at the maximum, and the West Fork Dry Canal Creek is over 3 miles from the Dry Canal Creek, which is even farther to the Canal River.
I'm the adjoining property, and when it rains, all of Harrison's manure from their cows flood into my land. And that is a direct flow, and when you say I shouldn't maybe drink a little bit, my horses ingest water from that creek as it's flowing, and it flows on a weekly basis right now because we're in an El Nino. And I swim in that creek that I live in, my child does. You say that, well, I can swim in it, but my well is on it. My well man said, when we tested the water, if I pull water right now while we're in the rainy season, your water's contaminated and I have to treat it with chlorine because it's not safe already. So you're saying that just let's go dump 1,300 homes of people's poop in my water, and I already can't drink my water without treating it, and you're going to say it's okay. Our bodies go through this water every day. I'll have to close my business and move somewhere else, and my land will have no value. My dreams are ended.
Ma'am, I feel for you, and I'm sorry that you have to go through that with your wells, but regarding the discharge for this wastewater treatment plant, at least what the permit says, the quality of the water that'll be coming out of the treated plant and the amount of flow compared to the existing flow, even on rainy conditions, is negligible. But if you look at the effluent limits, the limits are extremely stringent, and they will be protective of not only surface waters, but even extending into aquatic animals, which will be protective of livestock as well.
But when it floods in these, I see it in Johnson Ranch, it floods and I see their sewage plant overflow and I see green algae flowing from their treatment plant into the creek, right there into the Comal Creek. I live there too. And I see how those treatment plants are not regulated on a regular basis. And when it floods bad, it just goes. I don't know what dam is going to stop it out here. I don't understand how you're treating it. You can't treat it all at once when we have that much water coming through the pipes.
So the permit, I think what you're saying is in terms of the operation of the permit, but the permit itself does not allow for unauthorized discharges even in the events of rain. And so the quality of the effluent that has to come out has to meet the permit limits regardless of whether there's rain or not.
So first, I was going to ask a different question, but since you brought it up for primary contact recreation standards, was a Tier 1 degradation review done or a Tier 2, given the classification of both the Comal River and Dry Comal Creek as being impaired segments?
It was only required to have a Tier 1 review because the West Fork Dry Canal River has a limited aquatic life use because it's
But you just said that it's safe for
Can I
aquatic
finish?
life.
Because it's intermittent with perennial pools. But I did do a Tier 2 review, which included the nutrient screen. The Edwards Aquifer rule only requires a 1 milligram per liter total phosphorus, and we recommended a 0.15 milligrams per liter of total phosphorus.
Okay, well, that's great that you guys recommended that. I do have a question. So, Mr. Harrison is the landowner. Who's the operator? Like, it's great that you have these standards. Who's building this thing? Who's running it? Who's going to be the licensed operator, the person who needs to be licensed according to the state rules?
The permit requires a Class C operator, but we are going to plan on having a Class A operator operate the plant who's been around. And I just want to mention one other thing, just really quick about the phosphorus limit of 0.15. It is the strictest in the state. Across the street at Meyer Ranch this is 3 times more stringent for phosphorus than across the street at Meyer Ranch, 6 times more stringent than at Vintage Oaks.
Well, that's good because those all have complaints right now and some enforcement actions against them. But it is a rule that I read, and it's even in the TCEQ instructions, that there needs to be an operator on the permit. Who is going to be held responsible for this?
The permittee is held responsible
Yes,
in the end.
Mr. Harrison is the only one on the permit right now. Who else is on the permit besides SJWTX in the SPIF only?
The permittee is the responsible party. He would be the one
So
responsible.
Mr. Harrison is building and operating a wastewater plant. That is very impressive, Mr. Harrison. TCQ, any comment? That is your rule, right? You got the law guy here. Is that the rule?
I have to review the permit application and see who they.
So you haven't reviewed it, but you've approved it.
Nothing has been approved. The only thing that's happened here is that staff has preliminarily reviewed the application, and based on what they have submitted, it complies with the state's rules, and that's it. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity for you all to tell us things that we don't know yet. We rely on what the applicant tells us in applications. This is an opportunity for the public to tell us things that we don't know yet, so we can incorporate that into the permit. And ultimately, it is the commission decides to grant or deny the permit. This is the very, very beginning stage. There are no guarantees. It's purely an informational meeting. Nothing has been written in stone. No permit has been issued. This is purely a preliminary meeting. Just want to convey that to you all. Nothing has been granted to the applicant. They have no rights to construct, to build, anything. We're at the very, very beginning stages.
Did I hear that you have to contest it by the end of this meeting tonight?
No. You just have to submit a written comment by tonight. We'll issue a response to the comments, and you'll have 30 days to that point to then request a contested case. You can request it early if you want to tonight, but you have to do it in writing at the turning table.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good question.
I have one question, just a numerical question. The question is, how many caves and sinkholes have been identified on the property? How many caves and sinkholes have been identified on the property? I'm asking because we're in a karst region.
So for our review in terms of unsuitable site conditions, we look at the distance the facility is from any registered public or private wells. But we do not look into the application for any caves or karst formations.
We definitely take karst structures into consideration when we draft and review the permits. This is another opportunity, like the gentleman just asked, for you to present issues that we can consider and respond to. So if there are karst questions or sinkhole questions or cave questions, please submit comments formally or in writing so we can address that at a later date. Thank you.
Going back to the karst,
Can you step a little bit closer to the microphone, please?
Where do you get your information on the karst formations around the area?
I'm unaware of a specific TCQ rule that specifically requires that sort of a disclosure. We have certain disclosure requirements as part of our application, but if you know of any specific structures that we need to be aware of, we visited the plant site today and looked out there. We couldn't identify anything from the surface level, any obvious sinkholes or karst, but if there is something you want us to consider,
But this is the recharge zone.
technically where the permit is on the contributing zone. On the discharge route, it goes into the recharge zone along the discharge route, but it's in the contributing zone.
I have another question. You're responsible for surface waters, which means you're responsible for Dry Comal Creek. You're responsible for the Comal River. What happens when we have an operator, which we don't know when we have coliform and E. coli in our wells, and who's responsible for that? I would assume you are, since this is a surface type of water, and that surface is in a karst region, which goes down in and flows and affects our wells.
So the draft permit is written out to be protective of all existing surface water uses. And for that water to make its way down through the karst, through the limestone, into the aquifer itself, it's going through a series of layers of rock and dirt. The potential, if there is any, like those materials you were talking about, if there's increased E. coli or something, that would mean the permit is that the discharge is exceeding that limit by huge increases. It wouldn't be
And we
compliant.
have that already.
And if that is the
That
case,
is already in our wells all around us.
regardless
And
of
you know this, and you know this because you know all of the complaints of the area. You know it's going to be another problem. You know it's going to happen.
with the specific permit, if we find that those limits are being exceeded and we can show there's evidence that they're increasing their coli levels or phosphorus limits or nitrogen limits, that's enforceable. They can be fined against. Ultimately, they can have a permit denied upon review if it keeps.
But what have you done so far? Some of these communities have been out here for years, and people's wells are basically being affected by it, but nothing's done. So here we go with another subdivision in this area, and nothing's done. Nothing.
On the integrated report, there is a concern on the Comal River for bacteria.
Andy,
The permit will, bacteria would mean E. coli. Permit will have end-of-pipe limits equal to the segment criteria, so this discharge should not contribute to the water quality concerns for bacteria.
So when you test, are you gonna be at the headwaters of where the dry Comal Creek flows into the Comal, and are you gonna take a test above the dry Comal Creek, below in the Comal River, and look at the differences?
The testing for the facility is done at the end of pipe. From the facility, it's sent to an accredited lab that tests, and then that is put into an EPA database.
And I have another question. When there's a flood, and they were talking about Johnson Ranch, at that point in time, nothing can be done. So when there's a flood, there's nothing that can be done. That is literally in the surface water, in what you control. So at that point in time, when is it your responsibility?
If the effluent leaves the discharge route, that's not pursuant to our rule. That's an enforceable action. The applicant can't allow the effluent to leave the bed and banks of the
But how do
Comal
you
Creek or
stop it
anything.
in a flood? If it's flooding and it's gone over the banks, how do you expect them to stop?
In
They
those-
can't stop it.
This is what Venkata had addressed earlier about the proportion of the discharge, the amount of water being discharged in relation to the flood waters. So in that, based on how wide that creek is that we saw today, where the discharge is going to be, how wide it is based on the amount of cubic feet per second of water that's coming out of the plant, it is so small compared to how big the flood waters will be. The amount of effluent in relation to the flood is so small. It's not going to be predominantly effluent. that's not going to be the predominant thing in that water.
I live below 2 subdivisions. I live on the dry Mill Creek. I have a well, might be having some problems, and there's other people that do too. And it's just, I don't know where your responsibility starts, because I don't hear responsibility at all. I don't know where your responsibility is. I know it's the responsibility for permitting, but that's all I know. That's it.
Good evening. The folks that are sitting at these tables, my first question is, how many of you were in this area for the flood of 98? How about 2002? 2005? 07? So you understand that the area becomes volatile from water in its own control, and you'll lose complete control of the effluent. So the bottom line is, where are the engineering stress tests to determine what will happen in those events? Thought so. I'd like an answer to that question.
Yes. I believe during the 100-year event, about 600,000 CFS goes down the creek. The wastewater treatment facility will contribute 1 CFS of that 600,000.
What is a CFS?
CFS is cubic feet per second.
May I know the water source for this development? The water source.
The potable water is by Texas Water.
Are there any additional sources of water for this development?
Not that I'm aware of.
In order to bring in water from Texas Water Company, what will have to be accomplished?
That's not part of my purview. I'm on the wastewater side. I treat it.
Is there an answer to that we can get tonight?
The water to the division is not part of the wastewater side of the review. We just look at what's being discharged. We don't.
Well, the water coming in has to go out. So you have to know what the source of it, correct?
We look to control what is coming out of the plant. So it can be pristine water coming in, or other water quality coming in. Regardless of what's going in, we set a stringent limit for what has to come out.
Well, it's my understanding to bring in the water pipeline to this development, you would have to cross several properties. And if the property owners do not convey that property, then what then?
That's not our jurisdiction. That's
It is
the
my
applicant's.
understanding eminent domain will come into place, if that is the case, if they do not convey that. So this Harrison development is going to affect our community if the landowners do not convey that. So it should be known tonight at this public meeting what it's going to take to make this development happen. So in order to do that, I think it's only fair because those residents might be here tonight. That should be understood. And any water source that is to be used for this development should be known tonight. Because water is a big deal here, and we're running out. Thank you.
I forgot to mention, I have these beautiful caverns on my property that are a few feet away from this creek, and actually down watershed, it's a 4,000-foot cavern with massive holes I could jump into. So that water is just going to be flowing, but not even from the sewage treatment plant, but from the streets and the cars and from from here to you. That's like the Harrison Range from my cave. And it's not my cave, it's directed to Edwards Aquifers.
so we can use that. And we're going to address that in part of our response. We're not, it's going to be considered a promise.
Is it true that current drinking water standards do not require the removal of pharmaceuticals, microplastics, and personal healthcare residuals?
Please, do you have a response to that? Okay.
So regarding the pharmaceuticals and personal care providers, so the EPA doesn't have any requirements for this, but they are investigating these as emerging contaminants. For right now, we don't have any sort of direction as to how to limit or permit these emerging contaminants.
Secondly, is it true that state agents inspect sewage treatment plants for mechanical compliance only, infrequently, or in response to complaints? Treatment plants are required to self-test to ensure they are complying with TCEQ permit requirements. But the only time TCEQ makes water quality tests is when a downstream property owner files an odor or water pollution complaint. Usually repairs are only completed after a stream has been overloaded with improperly treated sewage.
So I'm a little confused with your question, ma'am. So
Are you a TCEQ?
Yes.
Okay. Do you check on the water coming out of these plants regularly?
So the permit has monitoring and reporting requirements for the effluent coming out of the plant.
Who does the reporting?
So these samples have to be sent to an accredited laboratory, and then the data from these samples is then sent to an ISIS database, which basically comes up in our DMR reports. And so we get to see what the quality of the effluent has been going back whenever they come in for renewals, going back 5 years. And so they have a certain schedule that they have to monitor and report the effluent quality on.
But it is the water treatment facility that gets the water and sends it off to whoever is doing the report on it, is that correct? Or does someone else come in and check it?
Who collects the sample?
Who oversees the collection of the samples? And how often?
I'll let her answer the first question.
Go ahead, next question. Right. So I, at the top of my head, I'm not aware of who exactly is responsible for sampling, but I think it is mentioned in the permit as to how the sampling should be done. But regarding a requirement as to who must be sampling at the outfall, we have requirements about where it has to be sampled and the frequency of sampling. But you can submit that in the formal comment section, and I will get back to you. I just don't want to.
So, what is it exactly that you all do?
So, are you specifically asking for
TCEQ. I mean, do you only oversee the permit?
Yes.
It's my first time speaking, so bear with me. I'm an investigator with the field office. Again, if I understand your question correctly, the operators who are licensed have to do the sampling. They can have some of their other operators do it, but the actual licensed operator needs to be there to make sure that everything's being done correctly. So they do it at the frequency specified in the permit, which could be twice a week, once a week, daily. It just depends on the permit. As far as who oversees them, we go out and do our inspections. I believe this permit is a minor discharger, so we do that once every term of the permit, once every 5 years. once every 5 years, but that's a requirement. We typically get out there once every 3 years. Trust me, it goes quick.
What about when it's flooding? Are you testing it then?
And this flood wall,
No.
at the plant, we can. At the actual rivers and stuff, no, because that's being influenced by all the other runoff that's in stream. Like you mentioned, you have all the other, Mr. Harrison's cows or whatever.
But those will be people, not cows.
Right.
The cows are turning into 1,300.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that the rivers, that gets influenced by something else. There's a specific sampling point at the plant where we grab our samples during our CCIs. The CCIs, comprehensive compliance investigations, we take 2 days to go through that plant. Starting from the headworks, all the way down to the outfall. We review the outfall to see what the receiving stream looks like. We make sure all the treatment units are repaired, working condition. Then we take another day going through all the records from a year, 2 years back. If there's any lift stations on the collection system, we go and do inspections on the lift stations. For the samples, yeah, we grab our own samples, which is, we try to go with the permit. It's the grab sample limit on the permit. So we're the ones that grab those, not the operators.
And do you notify the company before you come? I mean, do you say we're coming on this day?
Depends on their compliance history. So some of these plants, their operators are out there on the lines, doing their own inspections. Maybe they got a couple plants under the belt that they're going. So we would have to give them some notification to make sure they're there. That way we can do a proper inspection. If they're what we call SNC, where they have compliance issues in the past, we'll show up unannounced. And the frequency of the inspections pick up.
How have these other rivers around the country been in such bad shape? I have to believe there was some sort of a overseeing group like you, and yet nothing was ever picked up, and people are in big trouble.
I'm not aware of any specific examples, so I'm sorry.
All right, thanks, guys.
Tim Cronin's name, I live in the Bronx. I have a question about some of the, first of all, I'm gathering that that's the 137-page document that is online, that is the essence of this permit, correct? It's 137 pages. I don't know if anybody's able to read it. I tried to read it today, but I couldn't really read it.
I'm sorry, sir, did you say 137?
137 pages, yes, sir.
The application.
Oh, the application, yes.
All right. One of the things it says here is it says the buffer zone requirement is met by ownership. Can you explain that?
Yes, so the buffer zone is meant by ownership, essentially means that 150 feet surrounding every treatment unit in the facility is owned by, the land is owned by the owner of the facility.
Mr. Harris.
Yes.
And it also said on page 12 that the sewage sludge management and disposal would be sent to the Mesquite Creek landfill by truck. I wasn't aware that there was sludge in this.
It's another word for it.
There is. What's that have to use? So, can you explain that?
Sure. So, in the treatment process, when you are trying to clarify the water, you have to separate the solids from the treated water itself. So the solids that come out as the byproduct from the treatment process is what we call sludge.
So it goes to the Mesquite Creek landfill. Is that close by?
So I'm not aware of the location exactly.
That's what it said on page 12 of the application, 137 pages.
Yes, so when we get the application for the disposal methods of the sludge, there are various ways that a permittee can comply. So they can take it to a registered landfill, they can take it to a beneficial land application site, they can take it to another wastewater treatment plant to be processed even further. So we have to verify that the Mesquite landfill has the authorization to accept sludge.
It also says on this permit that the land is a large ranch, there is no grazing that occurs. Now, 547 acres, my guess is that we gotta have cattle on that to keep an agricultural exemption. So would you be able to explain that, or that's just something you're taking as part of the application and you're taking that as that there's no grazing? You got cattle out there that grazing.
So yeah, that is part of the application, and so there's, that's what we have to go by according to the application. But if you want to submit that in the formal comments section, then we can respond to that.
And going back to the lady who's before me, how many people at TCEQ test water in Comal County? How many do you have out here testing water? I don't care if it's water, wastewater, whatever. How many people are doing that just in Comal County that work for TCEQ?
Region, do you have any?
Hello, my name is George Ortiz. I'm the regional director. In the regional office here, we have roughly 47 investigators. They all do different types of sampling. So depending on the situation, we have several investigators.
So how many counties does that cover for this
15 counties.
15 counties, 47
Yes, sir.
people. And I had a couple other things. And also back to that, the things that were in this permit application, intermittent, and there was an observation done in June of 2022 that defines a dry creek is defined as intermittent if it's dry for 1 week during most years. Is that correct? Is that a definition you guys use?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and have these last three people ask their questions, and then we'll go ahead and take a break and move on to the formal comment session for tonight. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, my name is Little Cannon. I live at 30045 FM 3009. I am the third property owner down from Mr. Harrison. The creek runs through my property. And I have one question. You observed the site where the wastewater was going. How wide was that?
The initial point was 80 feet. The bed, the creek bank to creek bank to creek bank is 80 feet wide, and it narrows as it goes down towards, there's a tree line about a little over a quarter mile away, and it narrows slowly as it goes towards the tree line.
Okay. In that, then you're looking at the quarry or the property that's owned by the quarry. Is that correct?
I'm not sure who owns that property.
The next property over would be the quarry property. Is that correct?
I'm not sure who owns that property.
Okay. Well, it is. Then the next property is owned by a gentleman called Mr. Lee, who has a spring lake, about a half acre. That's been there for over 100 years. It's staged full stop, et cetera, and then the next property is mine. The width of the creek at my property is 15 to 30 feet. So what's 600,000 gallons of water coming down that creek going to do to my property?
So to imagine it, to be able to actually visualize it.
I'm imagining.
Yes. So 600,000 gallons, right? over the course of a day. And even when you have a facility that's permitted for 600,000 gallons, most of them really discharge about 60% of that. But assuming it's 600,000 gallons per day, that's about 1 cubic feet per second. So if you imagine a cube that's a foot long, foot wide, foot high, yeah, that's how much per second. Now if you stretch that cube by the width of it, by 15 feet, right? So that is the height that you will be increasing the creek by. So that is basically 1 foot divided by 15, which is less than an inch.
But these are dry creeks that you're gonna make wet constantly. We just have raw sewage just sitting there.
It's not, man, it's not raw sewage, it's treated effluent. So the quality of the water.
You're telling me I'm gonna have an inch of water running through my creek?
Less than an inch.
Less than an inch, full time.
Less than an inch. When it's discharging, less than an inch.
When it's discharging.
If it's discharging up to 600,000 gallons per day, then it will be less than an inch, but it'll most likely be less.
I'd like somebody to do that calculation.
And you can also submit that in the formal comment section so that we can actually address this in the
I
RGC.
would like that to be submitted.
You can come up again, and that you can either submit that as a written comment or provide it as a formal comment during the formal comment session.
Now, second question. You have a quarry next door. You were talking about the levels of the Carson, the limestone. That quarry is going to get deep down. Its obligation is, I think, 200 feet down to the aquifer level. Isn't that right, Don?
They can only go 25 feet.
They can only go 25 feet.
It's only 25 feet above the aquifer is all.
Above the aquifer. So you can have a hole 25 feet above the aquifer, right next door to where you're discharging sewage. So you're gonna have a huge lake there with 600,000 gallons of water pouring into it. Now that's gonna fill up if it doesn't discharge. But where's it discharging? It's discharging into the aquifer. So right next door, you got a big hole. Have you considered that? In the scheme of things, 20 years from now, when you have a full-blown community, you have the whole dug, and you've got 600,000 gallons of water. I probably won't see any of it. I won't see any flood water. So consider the fact that there's dynamics going on here that you may not have thought about. And the other thing that, next question, odor. Is odor part of the requirement or lack of odor or a sewage plant?
Yes, so
Well, I just want to mention one thing that I think we forgot to mention at the very beginning of this. The first thing is, the intent is to use membrane bioreactors to treat the water. That's the highest standard of which you can treat. So if you imagine an aerobic process that's cleaning the water, and then the clarifier settles those solids out. But in the case of a membrane bioreactor, the water is physically having to pass a barrier that has a pore size of 0.04 microns.
I
So it's-
understand that.
Okay, and the one thing I didn't mention at the beginning is when we submitted the application to the TCEQ, we also submitted a 210 reuse permit, reuse authorization application. The intent is to reuse 100% of the water on the site and not discharge anything.
I didn't see a 210.
So
It's an authorization
I know
on
what a
top
210.
of the discharge, so it doesn't get granted until after the permit is granted.
So you'll,
But we do intend to, and I apologize, we didn't mention that at the beginning. That is the intent, is to reuse the water.
is that considered
Let's let
why wasn't that mentioned? And I'm saying this in a real question. Going through all this process, you're gonna reuse the water on the residential area. Do you know about that?
So,
Were you told that? We just heard it.
No, so the applicant had mentioned to us that they are applying for a reuse authorization along with the permit. So yes, we did know. However, regardless, sir, I just have to say that it is our job still to make sure that because of applying for a discharge permit, that we have to see that the water quality, regardless of whether it's reuse or it's discharge, has to be protective of existing water uses.
Now, let's go back to the
Odor question, yes, sir.
So the odor that's emitted from wastewater treatment plants, there are several ways that the permittee can satisfy the requirement to not have odor. And the way the permittee satisfies this is having a buffer zone around the facility. Additionally, the treatment process, if the plant is operating correctly, should not contribute to odors. Even though it's a biological process, it should not contribute to odors of the treatment process if the facility is operated properly.
Okay, so you test the facility once every 3 years. How come it is, and all of us have experienced it, that you've driven down Highway 46, south of the Meyer Ranch, okay, with the north wind blowing, and we're catching all this odor?
It's coming off the Grove.
It's what?
It's coming off the Grove. They have a T-lap.
They have a lab?
A T-lap. Sorry.
That's a 210 reauthorization.
A what?
It's a 210 reauthorization at Meyer Ranch.
So they can be in
There's spring, they spray. Meyer Ranch has a holding tank right off of South Princeton Road. They take the water and they spray it out over the property. That was the settlement in order to build Meyer Ranch, which I'll talk about in formal comments. I am the only well that the Meyer Ranch is required to test. What I'm going to tell you tonight in formal comments, I held off saying, because I'm going to expose it tonight to let you know how this happens. My comments formal, and you'll see how the Meyer Ranch operates. They're operating, they have done their permit based on the Meyer Ranch. So when you get the formal comments, Wendell, you're going to hear what happens.
Okay.
But my well is tested by the Meyer Ranch once a year.
Let's let them ask their questions first.
Your lawyers settled the Meyer Ranch with me personally.
So
That's an important issue, though, that you have to consider with this permit, because you're already involved in a legal suit with the ranch people regarding the odor. So I'm just, I'm not going to get that. Most of the time, odor's going north, but I'm going to catch it occasionally. Now, what's going to happen when I catch that odor? I'm sued. Now, why should I have to waste my money if you guys make a mistake?
That's why we have what's called as the contested case hearing. So if you put in a formal comment that you're concerned about odor issues, and the commission determines you're an affected person, they'll refer you to the State Office of Administrative Hearings for a contested case hearing, and that issue gets reviewed by an administrative law judge. And that judge then makes a recommendation to the commission whether or not to issue the permit based on the issues that were raised during the hearing. So if the administrative law judge determines that that issue's not been properly addressed in the application or the permit, and the applicant or TCQ fails to meet their burdens, they'll recommend to the commission deny that permit based on this specific issue. So that's one of the referable issues under our jurisdiction is odor, and the commission does refer that fairly frequently to court to review.
Well, where do we stand? Are you going to do that much better? I have serious doubts. And your inspection, one more question. If you're going to have an inspection of the quality of the water that's being discharged, hire an independent inspector that can do it on a periodic basis more than once every 3 years.
The 3-year issue, that's only for the TCQ, the routine inspections. If we receive a complaint from our regional office, we don't wait to go out there and look at it. As soon as the complaint comes in, it's processed and investigators go out there and look at it. We don't wait and sit on complaints for years before we go out and investigate. If you file a complaint with us, our investigative enforcement team goes out and investigates source of that complaint. So we don't, it's only for that routine inspection. It's not for those that come in as a result of complaints from the general public.
Now, take into consideration, please take into consideration, I'm one of many people that creek property is on. So I'm just one of the few that's going to be directly affected by that flow, less than 1 inch going through my property. And what happens when we have a lot of rain like we've had now? It takes about 3 inches of rain with the whole quarry property covered, because we're in the headwaters, to actually get to my property, which is 2 properties away. So what's going to happen with that $600,000 if you're not reusing it, that goes through a quarry that's scraped the land dry, so it's just a smooth trail? What's going to happen to that $600,000? I think you need to consider a lot more things. Thank you.
Howdy. My name is Chris. Can you hear me okay? Is that good?
Okay.
So, between my wife and I, she owns a veterinary practice on 281, and I've got a smoked meats business off of 2722, and we live off of 272 as well. And I'll be quick because I gotta go home. But what I'm getting at is that we live here. We all live here. And my main business is Comal Tubes, which is a river outfitter on the Comal River. And I'm not a smart guy. I'm clever. I'm not smart. What am I supposed to tell my customers that come tubing when all of a sudden someone says or posts something that says there's 600,000 gallons of water that flows down that way towards the Comal River and then hits the Comal River? And it doesn't matter when we say, well, it's an inch, or it's nothing, or we're talking about biochemical. That doesn't make, that's not for me. What my concern is that we live here. I make my money here, and I spend it here, and I operate off of tourism. And this, while it might not seem like a big deal to y'all, New Braunfels is a very tourist-orientated place to come and enjoy and live. And I get that people want to come here. But my question is, and I'll get out of here, but my question is, what am I supposed to tell my customers? Because they're not going to know. They're not going to know that we've come to these meetings. They're not going to know the depth of which everyone here has done your research, and everyone behind us. It doesn't matter. We're all doing what we're supposed to do. But what happens when people come up from San Antonio and halfway up there they're like, oh no, oh, New Braunfels, yeah, they've got like sewer going into the Comal River. And even if it's not true, imagine what that does to the tourism, and imagine what that does to all these companies. And I get it. It's frustrating for everybody. But we all live here. So we have to deal with this. And it's not going to go anywhere unless we figure something out, because misinformation and good information, they both suck sometimes.
I'm sorry, do you have a question? Because this sounds like a comment, and we really want to get that on the record.
Right, okay, so what am I supposed to tell my customers that come tubing when they find out that there's hundreds of gallons of water that, even though it's not in the Comal River, what am I supposed to tell them because it is going into the Comal River? What am I supposed to tell them? And I'm not trying to start, I'm just saying, like, let's ask questions.
Yeah, no, I can understand where you're coming from, because
Do you own a business?
it's not about me owning a business, but it's the fact that I'm at this public meeting with y'all, answering your questions, and so I understand when there's fear about this, right? But when we look at the permit, and we keep that in mind, the fact that we are looking at this draft permit, and we do a technical review of this, is to make sure that existing water quality uses can be continued as it already is. In terms of what you want to tell your customers, that's not for us to tell you, but all I can say is this is part of the process of educating everyone about the wastewater treatment plant, the discharge and the quality of the effluent, and to ensure that the waters of the state are protected.
Cool. All right. Well, I like I said, we all live here, so we're gonna have to deal with all this no matter what. And y'all get to go wherever you go back to your homes. Just keep that in mind, okay? So that's all I have. I don't know. I'm good. I gotta go home.
My name is Bruce Carpenter. Several people that came right before me talked about the people who live here. I'm one of those. I'm very happy to hear that there is an intention to reuse the water that's coming out of the wastewater treatment plant, because that's both economically and ecologically more responsible. But an intention doesn't always actually happen. So my question is, are you planning to put in a separate set of distribution pipes for that gray water? And is it going to be then used for irrigation on the property? Are you planning to sell any of it to local pasture land, golf courses? Because that would be far more responsible. If you would let the people here know about those kinds of things, we would be much better informed, rather than just depending on these people who typically have a long history of benign neglect.
It's not gray water, it's actually highly treated water. And the intent is to reuse it in the green spaces, to treat it to that level, use it, and if others are interested, local parks, water trucks for dust suppression. I mean, that is what the intent is to be a steward of the water, in all of our water.
Treatment development plans actually have a separate set of pipes for the distribution of that?
The intent will be to have purple pipe.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on, take a break, and move on to the formal comment session. I understand you have more questions, but I invite you to submit them during the formal comment session. That way they can still be answered, but we really need to move on.
Holly. Okay.
I'm sorry, we really do have to move on to the formal comment session, so I really...
Go talk to him directly. No, I want them to hear it because it's very important. I don't want to just talk to y'all.
We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back for the formal comment session where you can submit that as either a written or a verbal question, and it will be responded to at a later date with the response to comments.
This time limit? No, they don't. This is a canned agenda.
Oh, yeah,
This just seems like a waste of time. So it doesn't, nothing matters.